All right, today we are diving into one of the most revolutionary periods in American politics. We're talking about the years between 1800 and 1848, when the doors to democracy were, seemingly thrown wide open. But, and this is a big but, only for some. We're going to uncover how this new kind of chaotic and deeply unequal political world really came to be.
To really get a feel for just how dramatic this time was, you have to hear this observation from a French visitor, Alexis de Tocqueville. When he showed up in the 1830s, he was just stunned by what he saw. A society buzzing with this constant political energy, a tumult, as he called it, that was totally different from anything back in Europe. It was noisy, it was messy, and it was something the world had never really seen before.
So that really brings us to the core question here, right? What in the world created this new, chaotic American democracy? Where did all this political energy even come from? I mean, what was behind this new, much louder, and way more participatory form of government?
Okay, so let's dig into the causes of all this political change. And the answer, maybe surprisingly, isn't just about politics. See, the political upheaval of this era didn't just pop up out of nowhere. It was really fueled by this powerful new idea of what it even meant to be an American.
And right at the heart of that new ideal was this incredible figure, the self-made man. This was basically the hero of the age. The core belief, which was totally revolutionary back then, was that a young man, no matter how humble his beginnings, could rise up based on his own talent and his own effort. Your birth no longer defined your destiny. You did.
But here's where we hit a massive contradiction at the very center of this new idea of equality. The ideal was all about equality of opportunity for everyone. But the reality, well, that reality was that this idea was pretty much exclusively for white men. It completely and conveniently ignored the brutal enslavement of African Americans and all the legal and cultural barriers that shut women out of public life.
So, with this new ideal of the common man taking hold, how did it actually change the country? Well, the effects were huge, and the first place you really see it is with the voters themselves. The very definition of who could vote started to expand a lot. So how did this happen? Well, it was the new Western states, places like Indiana, Illinois, and Missouri, that were really leading the way. As they wrote their new state constitutions, they just got rid of the old rules. All of a sudden, you didn't have to own property to vote anymore. Those old religious qualifications, gone. The result was pretty revolutionary. Pretty much all white men could now vote and even hold office. And the impact of these changes was just staggering. Get this, in just 16 years, the number of people who voted in presidential elections multiplied by 7 times. This wasn't some slow, gradual change. It was a flat-out political explosion. Yeah, the numbers really tell the whole story here. In 1824, you had about 350,000 people voting for president. Fast forward to 1840, and that number just skyrockets to 2.4 million. And these aren't just numbers on a chart, right? We're talking about millions of farmers and workers who had been completely shut out of the system and were now, for the very first time, actually casting a vote.
So, with millions of new voters flooding into the system, the old way of doing politics just started to break down. It couldn't handle the pressure. The entire game had to change to appeal to this huge new group of voters.
Okay, so for decades, the way we picked presidential candidates was this thing called King Caucus. And you could just picture it, right? A smoky, closed-door room where a few powerful guys in Congress would just pick their candidate. The regular person on the street, they had zero say. It was totally top-down.
But that old system got completely swept away by something new, the nominating convention. And this threw the whole process wide open. Now you had politicians and voters from all over the country gathering in these huge, noisy halls to actually debate and choose their candidates. It was definitely messy, for sure, but it was also way, way more democratic.
And the changes kept coming. It wasn't just about conventions. Power kept shifting more and more to the voters. For instance, instead of state legislatures picking presidential electors, people started voting for them directly. And more local jobs, things like sheriffs and judges, went from being appointed to being elected. Democracy was really becoming part of everyday life.
So, what did this new kind of politics actually feel like for people? Well, it was basically a form of local entertainment. Campaigns turned into these huge public spectacles. We're talking parades, marching bands, big rallies with free food and drinks to get the crowds out. But there was a downside, of course. It also got pretty nasty. Candidates started using personal attacks and mudslinging instead of, just debating the actual issues.
Okay, so let's say you're a politician, and you just won a big election. How do you reward all the people who helped you get there? Well, President Andrew Jackson had an answer for that. It was called the spoils system. The idea was super simple. To the victor belong the spoils. When your party won, you'd fire a bunch of government workers and give their jobs, like postmaster, to your loyal party supporters.
Now, I know what that sounds like. It sounds like straight-up corruption. But to Andrew Jackson and his followers, they saw it as a democratic reform. This quote from him really gets to the heart of it. They believed that by rotating people in and out of these jobs, they were proving that any ordinary American was capable enough to work in government. It was a direct shot at the idea of a permanent elite group of insiders running everything.
All right, so we've seen this massive expansion of political participation, a real revolution in the system. But this brings us to what is probably the most important question of all. Who was this new democracy really for? And the reality is, it was pretty stark. Look, while the circle of democracy got way bigger to include basically all white men, no matter how rich or poor, the walls of exclusion just got built even higher for everyone else. For women, for enslaved African Americans, and for other non-white people, this new age of the common man actually made things worse. It reinforced their exclusion from power.
And that leaves us with a really crucial thought to end on. The story of this era isn't just a simple story of democracy expanding. It's a story of how democracy for some was built by reinforcing the exclusion of others. And the question this history really pushes us to think about is, what's the legacy of that choice? How do we see the echoes of that decision in the debates we're still having about who belongs and what equality really means today?